This lesson we're going to be looking at the HTTP protocol. So this is the web protocol.
This video is brought to you by Appy's Academy.
And every website that you go to is going to be using that by default within the browser. So it's up here at the front. Sometimes it's HTTPS, so that's the secure version of the HTTP protocol. And what it does is it allows us to transfer content on the web. So within the browser, we're able to fetch information, resources, such as HTML documents, and then read the contents of them within this protocol. And this is different than the file protocol. So if you just go to your web page, that index.html that we've been working with, and you open it up in the browser, that's going to be running under the file protocol. And you can see that whenever you open it up within the browser, the file protocol is going to have the full path that you are accessing the file from on your computer. So in this case, it's users, website, JSON, and that's the folder that I've been working out of. And that's where I've got the index file. Whereas with the HTTP protocol, you don't have the file in the front there, but you also have the URL. And this is going to be the web address of where this file is located. And in this case, it's running on a local machine run by brackets, and that's allowing us to use the HTTP protocol. So for the upcoming lessons, if you are still using the file protocol, that means that you've opened up the file by default into a browser. You're going to see that this is the file protocol, and some of this stuff won't work, especially if you're trying to connect to external files. It's not going to be able to transfer that information back. And as well, in this lesson, we are going to be looking at local storage, and local storage also requires the HTTP protocol in order for us to be able to store content locally, because it does reference the web URL, and that's how it stores the content locally. So let's open up the local storage, and we're going to set some content within the local storage. Local storage is available under application if you're using the Chrome browser, and they've got the local storage and the session storage and cookies, and there's the HTTP where we can store contents to the local storage. So you can open that up as well within your browser if you're using Chrome under the DevTools under application, and see the contents stored within the local storage. So first of all, let's store an item into local storage, and every item needs to be stored as a string value. So let's first construct our object again, and remember the curly brackets, and then we're gonna do it with the double quotes, comma separated out, last, so space, so name, and then the value, colon separated value. And if we want to store the my object under one key into the local storage, where it's expecting one value, which is only going to be a string value, we need to convert it using the JSON stringify. So let's take the value and use JSON stringify the my object. So now it's going to be within a string format, and then we can access the local storage and then use set item with local storage, and let's give it a name. We'll just call it test, and the value that we're going to be saving is val. So let's refresh, and now we've got the value, and this is the object that's being stored, but it's being stored as a string value. And the browser is actually the one that's breaking this up because it's detecting that it is within a JSON format, and it's able to read it out as an object. So if we want to get content that's been stored, so let me comment this one out, and we want to retrieve back this object, and we want to maybe update it or do something with that value that's stored. So maybe the first name changed and we want to update that. So how would we go about doing that? So first we would select and create a variable that is going to be the object, and we would pull back the information from the storage. So first let's just do that as local storage, and we're retrieving back test. And what we need to do with local storage is we need to get item and then specify the name of the item that we want to return back, and in this case it's going to be test. And let's console log out val2 just to make sure that we do have it. So refresh, go into the console, and there's our string value. So next, if we want to make use of it, then we do need to break it apart, and that's where we would use the JSON stringify. So let's create another variable, and using JSON or JSON parse in order to break apart the string object, and then take val2, and now we'll console log val3 and refresh. Go back into the console. So now we've got it within an object format, and that means that we can make updates to it. So what I want you to do now is pause the video and store an item to your local storage and update that item and then save it back to the local storage. So you can have a value that's incrementing and save it to the local storage. And I'll show you the solution coming up. So every time the page loads, I want you to output a new value, an incrementing value, to include a counter on your page. And I do want you to keep it as a JSON object. And so that means a little bit more complex than just having one string value for a counter being saved to local storage. And the way the counter should work is that every time you refresh the page, the counter is incrementing because it's saving it to the local storage. And you're taking a JSON object, converting into a string, updating it, and then converting it back into a string value and then storing it back into local storage. So go ahead and try that. Pause the video, try that, and I'll walk you through the solution coming up. So the solution in order to make the count, and I'm going to do it within the object. I'll call it counter, and this is going to be just a number. I want to set to the local storage the counter, and we can use the JSON stringify, and let's refresh. So now we've got a new item saved within the local storage, and this one has a value called counter. So next what we need to do is we need to pull back that value in the counter and make use of it. So let's first retrieve the information, and we can use val2 again, and then using the local storage, let's get item counter, and then we need to use JSON parse to return it back into an object format. Val3 counter, we increment it by 1. Let's turn it back into, we'll just do val4, and we're going to use JSON stringify this time to turn that object back into a string value. And then using the local storage set item, we're going to set the item of counter to whatever is contained within val4. And I'm going to comment this one out because we've already set the item. So let's refresh again, and now our counter is incrementing. And the last part of the challenge was to output it into the message, text, content, and we want to output the value of. So now every time we refresh the page, we see the counter is increasing.